Somewhere outside Waco, Texas, a family of four is finishing dinner inside a giant corrugated steel tube. The shell of their entire house arrived on a flatbed truck and cost $8,500. The median American home now sells for over $420,000. That gap is why priced-out couples are turning to Quonset homes, steel arches the U.S. Navy invented in 1941 for a war, not for families. Yet right now, people are pouring concrete slabs in rural fields and bolting these homes together by hand. So what is living in one actually like? And is that $8,500 real or the biggest catch in budget housing? To answer that, you have to go back to a naval base in Rhode Island. In early 1941, the United States military had a problem. War was spreading across Europe and the Pacific, and the Navy needed shelters that could be shipped anywhere on Earth and assembled by untrained sailors with basic hand tools. Engineers at Quonset Point Naval Air Station in Rhode Island took inspiration from the British Nissen hut of World War I and designed something even simpler: a half-cylinder of corrugated galvanized steel, curved ribs, a plywood floor, and two flat-end walls. No load-bearing interior walls, no complicated roof framing, nothing that could go wrong. A small crew could bolt one together in a day. The design worked so well that American factories produced more than 150,000 of them during the war. Quonset huts became barracks, hospitals, chapels, mess halls, and aircraft hangars from the Aleutian Islands to the South Pacific. Soldiers slept in them, got surgery in them, and got married in them. Then the war ended, and something unexpected happened. Millions of veterans came home to a country with a massive housing shortage. Builders could not put up houses fast enough, and the military was sitting on mountains of surplus steel buildings it no longer needed. So the government sold Quonset huts to civilians for around $1,000 each. Universities lined them up in rows as married student housing. Young families cut windows into the curved steel walls, hung curtains, and raised kids inside buildings designed for machine gun crews. In some American towns, entire neighborhoods of arched metal homes appeared almost overnight. Most of those neighborhoods were supposed to be temporary. Some of those huts are still standing 80 years later, which tells you something important about this design. But the modern Quonset home story really begins with what happened to the kits. Today, several American steel building companies sell modern versions of the Quonset design as bolt-together arch kits. The steel is better now, usually a coated alloy called galvalume that resists rust for decades, and the arches come engineered for local wind and snow loads. You choose a model shape, a full half circle, a rounded style with straighter side walls, or a peaked arch. Then you choose a width and length, and a truck shows up at your property with your entire house stacked flat on pallets. And this is where that $8,500 number comes from, because it explains everything about the marketing. $8,500 gets you a small, bare steel shell, roughly the arches, the bolts, and the engineering drawings for something in the range of a compact garage or a very small dwelling. It does not include the concrete foundation the arches bolt into. It does not include the end walls, which on many kits are sold separately and can cost thousands on their own. Doors, windows, insulation, plumbing, wiring, interior walls, none of that is in the box either. What you are buying for $8,500 is the skeleton and the skin of a building delivered to a patch of dirt. That sounds like a scam until you compare it to conventional construction, where the framing and roof of a traditional stick-built house can swallow a huge share of the budget and require professional crews. The steel arch kit compresses that entire phase into a stack of identical curved panels and a box of bolts. Which leads to the part of this story that hooks almost everyone who goes down this rabbit hole. Regular people can build these themselves. The process looks like this. First comes the concrete slab, poured with a reinforced perimeter footing and anchor bolts or a steel base connector running along both long edges. This is the one stage where most owners hire professionals, because a bad foundation ruins everything that comes after. Once the slab cures, the actual house begins, and it begins on the ground. Each arch of the building is assembled flat, lying in the dirt or on the slab. Individual curved steel panels, each one light enough for two people to carry, get bolted together edge to edge until they form one complete rib stretching from one side of the foundation to the other. A family with a couple of friends can assemble arches all day, lining up bolt holes, running impact drivers, working down the ribs one by one. Then comes raising day, and if you have ever seen drone footage of a Quonset build, this is the moment that goes viral. The crew lifts a completed arch upright, sometimes with a rented telehandler or small crane, sometimes with nothing but scaffolding, ropes, and stubbornness. The first arch stands alone against the sky like a steel rainbow. The second one bolts to it, then the third. Every arch added makes the structure stiffer, and the building grows down the slab one rib at a time, a rhythm of lift, align, bolt, repeat. The arches alone do not make a building, though. Each end of the tube still needs a wall. And this is where Quonset homes stop being kits and start being houses. Most families frame the end walls in conventional wood studs, which sounds ironic for a steel house until you realize it is the smart move. Wood framing takes standard doors, standard windows, and standard siding, so the two flat ends become the one part of the build where normal residential skills and normal hardware store materials apply. One end usually gets the entry door and shop access. The other end is where the dramatic stuff happens, and we will get to that in a minute. Owner-builders regularly report going from bare slab to a fully enclosed, weather-tight steel shell in a matter of weeks, working evenings and weekends. Compare that with conventional home construction timelines that stretch across many months with multiple contractor crews, and you can see why exhausted, priced-out families find this so appealing. There is no roofing crew because the walls are the roof. There is no framing inspection drama because the frame is the building. But standing inside a bare steel shell and living in a finished home are two very different experiences. And the interior is where Quonset homes get genuinely strange, in both good ways and bad ones. Start with the good. Because the arch carries all the structural load, there is not a single load-bearing wall inside. The entire footprint is one uninterrupted open space, which means the floor plan is whatever the family wants it to be. Walk into a finished Quonset home, and you will usually find a soaring, open living area under the curved ceiling, a kitchen island floating in open space, and a loft bedroom built on a wooden mezzanine up in the curve of the arch, reached by a staircase or ladder. Many owners glaze one entire end wall with floor-to-ceiling windows, and the effect is dramatic, a wall of glass framed by a steel arch, flooding the whole tube with natural light. Interior designers who work on these homes lean into the contrast, warm wood plank ceilings and white walls playing against exposed corrugated steel. Ceiling height in the center of a wide arch can reach 16 or 20 feet, which makes even a modest square footage feel enormous. Families describe a feeling closer to a loft apartment or a converted church than a normal house. Now, the strange part's because there is a reason this design did not take over America in 1950. The walls curve. That sounds obvious until you try to put a bookshelf, a refrigerator, or a standard kitchen cabinet against one. Along both long sides of the home, the wall leans inward, creating low zones where an adult cannot stand upright. Smart owners turn those zones into storage, built-in benches, closets, and bed nooks. But the honest truth is that a Quonset home loses usable floor space compared to a rectangular building of the same footprint. A family buying a 40-foot wide arch is really buying maybe 30-something feet of full-height living width. Then there is the sound. Rain on a steel arch is loud, and owners either love it or hate it. Heavy insulation tames it into a cozy drumming that many families say they fall asleep to. Skip the insulation and a hailstorm sounds like living inside a snare drum. The curve plays tricks with sound on the inside too. A big open steel tube full of hard surfaces echoes like a gymnasium, which is why finished Quonset interiors lean so heavily on rugs, bookshelves, wood paneling, and fabric. Owners figure this out fast, usually the first time they hear their own footsteps bounce down the full length of the building. And insulation is not optional for a much bigger reason: condensation. A bare steel building sweats. Warm, humid indoor air touching cold steel turns into water droplets running down the walls, and unchecked, that moisture ruins interiors and breeds rust. Nearly every successful Quonset home solves this the same way. Closed-cell spray foam applied directly against the interior steel, sealing the metal away from indoor air entirely. It costs thousands of dollars. It is one of the least skippable line items in the whole budget. And the builds that cut this corner are the horror stories you find in the forums. The upside of sealing the shell that thoroughly is what it does to the utility bills. A spray-foamed steel arch is airtight in a way most wood-framed houses never manage, and the arch shape encloses its living space with relatively little exterior surface, which means less area to lose heat through. Owners heat these homes with wood stoves, ductless mini-split units, or radiant tubing cast right into the concrete slab, warm floors under the entire footprint. Families in cold climates report heating bills that surprise their neighbors, and in summer, a reflective coating on the steel roof bounces sunlight away before it ever becomes indoor heat. If you are finding this breakdown useful, hit subscribe. This channel covers unconventional homes and what they actually cost every single week. So why would a family actually choose steel arches over a normal wood-framed house, beyond the sticker price? Talk to owners and the same answers keep coming up, and most of them come down to what this building was engineered to survive. The arch is one of the strongest shapes in structural engineering, and a corrugated steel arch anchored into concrete behaves less like a house and more like a bunker. Wind flows over the curve instead of slamming into flat walls. Manufacturers engineer these kits to meet severe wind ratings, and in tornado-prone stretches of Oklahoma, Kansas, and Texas, that is not an abstract selling point. Families there talk about watching storm warnings with a completely different feeling than they had in a wood-framed house. Snow Country tells the same story. Steep curved steel sheds, snow loads that collapse flat roofs, which is why arch buildings have been quietly common in rural Canada and the American Mountain West for decades. And then there is fire. A steel shell does not ignite. After California's devastating wildfires leveled entire towns, some rebuilding homeowners in fire country started looking hard at metal buildings because embers landing on corrugated steel find nothing to burn. Insurance in wildfire zones has become brutally expensive or unavailable for conventional homes, and a non-combustible shell changes that conversation. No design makes a home fireproof. Windows and vents and contents still burn, yet owners in fire country consistently list the steel shell as the reason they sleep at night. And underneath all that disaster resistance sits a quieter advantage, maintenance, or the near absence of it. A conventional roof needs new shingles every couple of decades. A Quonset home has no shingles because roof and wall are one continuous sheet of Galvalume, a material manufacturers back with warranties measured in decades. There is no wood siding to repaint, no framing hidden inside the curved walls to rot, and termites, which cause billions of dollars in damage to American homes every year, cannot eat steel. Owners describe their upkeep as checking bolts, touching up scratches in the coating, and living with the occasional dent. That is roughly the entire list. Stack those advantages against the real total cost and the picture gets clearer. The $8,500 shell is where the spending starts. The concrete slab with its reinforced footings often runs well into 5 figures on its own. Framing and glazing the end walls adds thousands more, especially if one end becomes that wall of glass. Closed cell spray foam for a whole house is commonly a $5,000 to $10,000 line item. And because most of these builds sit on rural land, there are the pieces city buyers forget: a well or water hookup, a septic system, and bringing electrical service to the site. By the time it all adds up, with plumbing, wiring, and interior finishes on top, real-world owner-builder budgets tend to land somewhere between roughly $80,000 and $150,000 depending on size, finishes, and how much labor the family does themselves. That is a serious amount of money. It is also a fraction of the median American home price for a building that may outlast anything else on the street. So why isn't every priced-out family in America pouring a slab right now? This is the part of the video that the kit manufacturers will not put in their ads. And if you are seriously considering one of these homes, the next few minutes matter more than everything you have heard so far. The first wall families hit is money, specifically borrowed money. Banks write mortgages against houses they understand, and a steel arch home confuses the entire machine. Appraisers struggle to find comparable sales because there may not be another Quonset home within 100 miles. Without comparables, lenders get nervous, and many conventional mortgage applications for arch homes simply die in underwriting. Families make it work through construction loans, land equity, credit unions, or the most common path of all, building slowly in cash, one phase at a time as savings allow. The low price makes cash possible, but it means the $8,500 dream mostly belongs to people who can fund a build without a traditional mortgage. The second wall is paperwork. Zoning boards and permit offices in many counties have never reviewed an arch home, and some suburban jurisdictions have design standards that quietly or openly prohibit them. Homeowners associations almost universally will not allow a corrugated steel house. This is why the Quonset home map of America is overwhelmingly rural, unincorporated county land where a family answers to a building inspector and nobody else. Owners repeat one piece of advice more than any other: call the county planning office before you fall in love with a kit, not after it is sitting on your slab. The third wall is the exit. Nobody really knows what a Quonset home resells for because so few ever come to market. The buyer pool for a steel arch house is small and specific, and a family that pours $120,000 into a build cannot count on getting it back the way a conventional homeowner can. For some owners, that risk is disqualifying. For others, it misses the point entirely because they are not buying an investment vehicle. They are buying a paid-off roof. And that brings us to the people actually building these homes, because the pattern is striking. Scroll through the Quonset build channels and community forums, and three groups keep appearing. Young couples, often in their late 20s and 30s, who did the math on a $400,000 starter home with a 7% mortgage and walked away from the entire system. Many of them document the whole journey on camera: the slab pour, the first arch raising, the spray foam day, the night they finally sleep inside. Homesteaders make up the second group, families on rural acreage who want a durable, low-maintenance building that shrugs off weather and can be expanded later, sometimes starting with the arch as a workshop and converting it into the main house. The third group is quieter, rebuilders, people who lost conventional homes to wildfire or windstorm and made a promise to themselves about the next one. Listen to enough of them, and one theme keeps surfacing: control. They talk about knowing every bolt in their own walls, about a house with no hidden framing to rot and no roof shingles to replace, about owing nothing to a bank. The building the Navy designed to be disposable turned out to be almost indestructible, and the families living in them today have essentially flipped its original purpose. It was engineered for temporary shelter in a global emergency. They are using it as permanent shelter in a slower emergency, the one where an ordinary house costs 6 or 8 times an ordinary salary. A Quonset home is not for everyone, and this is worth saying plainly. It fights you on financing, it fights you at the zoning office, it eats floor space along its curved walls, and it demands honesty about condensation and insulation from day one. Families who go in expecting a cheap shortcut tend to quit at the permit stage. The ones who make it through go in with a spreadsheet, a rural parcel, and realistic numbers, and many of them end up standing in a soaring, light-filled steel arch that they own outright, built partly with their own hands, engineered to outlast every wood-framed house around it. Back in 1941, engineers at Quonset Point were told to design something fast, cheap, and strong enough to survive a war. 85 years later, that is an almost perfect description of what priced-out American families say they are looking for in a home. The huts were never supposed to last. The problem they solve apparently was. If you want to see the other side of this movement, the families building homes out of steel shipping containers instead of steel arches, that video is on screen right now.